Legacy Week 9, as always, had its ups, its downs, its early exits, or possibly injuries. And we were kind of riddled with a couple teams, one in particular that just went off in epic standards. And I'm not talking about NFL team, I'm talking about our team. So let's get to the NFL, and then let's just discover who just completely thumped the league this week. Week 9 in the NFL is always a funky one because for them in the actual league, they're on the second half, but they still have a fair bit to play for. In fantasy, we only have a few more weeks realistically, and you're going to start to notice over the next couple weeks that some teams may even start to clinch, which means the playoff run is very much in full swing, making the trade deadline actually a really, really interesting timing for us. Now, trades we've talked about for the last couple weeks, but this particular week, right by the deadline, we've seen in the last little bit tons of talent change hands. Now, sometimes these are defensive talents, and that's something to pay attention to, obviously, for our team defenses and matchups, etc. But honestly, we're going to be swung by some of the talent that's going through. Now, there was a running back I can think of, but mainly this is wide receivers. But just in general, this kind of gives us an idea of who are the buyers and who are the sellers. Obviously, in fantasy, there's a few different ways this can be of value. If a team trades away their number one and you have their number two, I mean, even though we're going to talk about the trade away teams in a second here, there's always fringe benefit. I mean, they got to score sometime. But then obviously, if you got the person, it's always the question of whether or not they can mesh. Now, if you happen to have Hopkins, obviously you're pretty pumped. He came out and had a great Monday night. I mean, I would assume you're happy that he's getting tosses from Holmes as opposed to whoever Tennessee was lining up, whether it was Billy Jeans or a sub. But you're looking at the Steelers, the Ravens, the Chiefs, Washington, Buffalo, Cowboys, Cincinnati, and Minnesota all as buyers in some way, shape, or form. Now, in some cases, it's more than one player, and I think the Steelers and Ravens have made a very key point that they're going for it on this one. Steelers even more interesting. They had one George Pickens, so they decided why not get two? You know, maybe they're going for the whole 3 and layup strategy of basketball, where it's either run game, which has been solid, or air it out, because they can't really seem to throw the mid-rangers. Chiefs, we already talked about. Bills have been interesting because that one's been a couple weeks, and that's been up and down, even though the market value on that one, the amount of money they're paying that particular receiver in Cooper is probably going to work out. I think the weirdest one, I mean, Cincinnati going for a backup running back is smart, but, I mean, the Cowboys and Mingo? Kind of thought they'd be sellers, not buyers. Speaking of sellers, we have some people that we might assume. Now, these are also, the 2-win teams are very much represented. Just to point out, if you haven't noticed, every team in the league has at least 2 wins, which is quite a rarity at this point in time. That's New England, Miami, Cleveland, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Vegas, the Giants, and the Saints. And you're going to hear a couple of those names again because of the Browns, Vegas, you got Carolina, you got New Orleans, you got Tennessee, Jacksonville. They're all sellers. Throw Chicago in there too because they just got rid of some talent. And these are all teams that are looking to kind of make a change. Maybe some of them were teams that a couple weeks ago thought they might have a run, and I mean, even with Cleveland, now they have a quarterback who throws touchdowns. Unfortunately, he also throws a lot of interceptions. Congrats on that one, Winston. He passed the 100 mark. He now has 102 interceptions. The Saints, I mean, what a rough week because not only do you lose your primary wide receiver in Olave, but your quarterback's kind of riddled in a bit of an odd situation. A stat that came out that I think is hilarious that some people may have already looked at. If you look at starting quarterbacks after so many seasons, so starting quarterbacks with the most amount of losses after 4 seasons is actually Derek Carr. David Carr. I'm eventually going to get those right. David Carr after 4 seasons, after 5 seasons, and after 6 seasons. Once we get to 7 seasons, then he passes the baton off to Derek, the one who I keep calling David or Derek and whatever. And that's 8 seasons, 9 seasons, 10 seasons. And then in the 11th season, Derek Carr is currently tied with Archie Manning. Smart Money says he might just pass him. But not only are you in that stat, but you also have to get just absolutely thrashed by one of your former wide receivers. So kind of a rough week all around, aside from the fact that you just got beat by one of those other now 2-win teams. The only team I didn't mention because they're a buyer and a seller, that's our good old Jets. We spent a lot of time talking about them anyway in the past couple weeks, but Rodgers essentially just gets what Rodgers wants. So he got his friend in at receiver who's doing okay and I think steadily better as the week goes on. And he got rid of this receiver he didn't like, who ran routes that he didn't appreciate. He also may, who knows, maybe he won't even finish the season because now his buddy's probably also going to be the head of the CDC by the end of this thing, taking fluoride out of the water. But let's not make this political. I think we've had a rough enough day in general. And football is actually a nice discourse away from all that. Speaking of which, we do have a lot to talk about, and there's a bunch of stuff to look forward to Week 10. So let's get right to our team week breakdowns. I'm going to go back and check, but I can't find a week bigger than 231. My goodness, that is the real atrocity that, Tim, you actually went over your predicted. You had a wide receiver out, unfortunately, at the last minute, but you could have put someone else in and had a very reasonable score. And yet you still lost by 100. 231, Connor, screw off. That was just way too much. So I'm going to talk about Tim first. Way to put Dell in. And actually the big gut call, I'm obviously in a bunch of leagues. And a lot of people didn't have the guts to put Hopkins in on his first run through with the Chiefs, not really knowing how the chemistry is going to work. Turns out it works. You got a couple touchdowns out of that, and certainly a massive overperformance from Stevenson. As I said, you did have a blank there with Cooper with that late scratch. You did have some, people you could have put in Hill as your tight end 5. You could have put him in the flex, but realistically, you also just could have benched everyone because who freaking cares? Connor came to play this week. He definitely came out of the gates pretty solid. He had the quarterback 2. He had the running back 3 in Kamara. He had the defense 2 in the Chargers. Weirdly enough, he actually had the wide receiver 2 starting and the wide receiver 1 on his bench. So think about that for a second. It could have been worse. Yeah. Just when it rains, it pours on you, this one, Tim. At least you knew early so you could go and take a nap or do whatever you wanted to do. This one was done at kickoff. Connor, please stop doing this because you're just now cracking the playoffs. And lest us not forget, Connor tends to go on a roll in these playoffs, so let's not make these 200s a common affair. Tim, not much you can say, buddy. Got to bounce back. You go 127, you're going to have a couple wins. So it's not over yet. You just definitely need to go on a run. Gene, our formerly undefeated machine. In any other gin bar, in any other place in the world, 188 would take it down. But in this particular case, it's just a second place, but a pretty dominant one. You bumped into Jeff in a very key playoff match. Now, Jeff, you took the loss, but at least you're staying top 4, and you were just around predicted, so you might as well just gotten it out of your system. If we take a look, Daniel Jones was your shining star, and if you have to say that more than 2 or 3 times this year, that's not going to go well. You definitely still had some people perform. You almost had a near commando here with an empty basement. You had a bunch of bye week issues, and you've got some injuries, so fairly certain you can bounce back going into next week. Gene, you did have the quarterback 1. You had the running back 1, and actually the running back 1 who had the best play of the week. If you guys didn't see Saquon's reverse hurdle or revertal, it's a great play when the bench starts going crazy just out of a freak athletic performance and just kind of weird because he goes butt first into a tackle and then still clears the guy. You also had a tight end 3 in Auden who's been coming on since the Bucs don't really have a whole lot of other people to pass to that are healthy, so that you certainly benefited from. Similarly, you could have had Baker in there, but you did have an extremely empty basement with some of your issues with injuries and buys, so coming back, you'll be just as dangerous next week. You still obviously hang on to the top spot. I think you got to fall a few to maybe bet for that be in danger. I wouldn't be shocked if we start seeing a star by your name soon enough. And like I said, Jeff, you took the loss, but you're still top 4, so things could certainly be a lot worse. Speaking of things being a lot worse, we got 2 people on the outside looking in. I was pretty happy, though. I kind of knew coming out of the gate I came pretty strong. And unfortunately, Marco, you kind of came out the exact opposite way. Brown got hurt, so that's something you want to pay attention to. Underperformances from your running back area, and I don't know if you were paying attention to your defense or not, but I appreciated the freebies. I'm not too proud. I'll take anything. You did have the quarterback 4 in Geno, and he hasn't always been super consistent, but that was a pretty good one for you. For me, I had a couple people step up. I had the running back 2 in HN, and I did start the defense 4. but I just had kind of a solid stream and I didn't have too many people massively underperforming. Even here, I could have been a little bit craftier. Also could have put in, the guy that I normally think starts, but for whatever reason, I think he'd have a good game. I was dead wrong, 85 rush yards and a couple of touchdowns. So I'll put him in so he can stink next week, but definitely should have put him in this week. Got the win. Definitely need it, and we'll see in the standings. I'm just on the outside looking in, but I'm not too far, so still got a shot. Similarly, Marco, you're only really a game off, so you're only 1 or 2 runs away here from getting back into that playoff spot. 2 more teams looking at the playoffs right now, and this was by far our Monday night miracle. I believe at the start, Rennie, you were 11% to win, because Maddie did have a pretty significant lead, 42.64, I believe. And he had Worthy going against the old school duel of Kelce and Mahomes. I was going to make a joke beforehand being like, wow, if they turn back the clock and they have vintage Mahomes and Kelce days, Rennie might actually have a shot, but ... let's see. Mahomes was our quarterback 5. Kelce was our tight end 2. So yeah, they turned back the clock. Mahomes finally realized that sometimes it's just easier if he passes for touchdowns instead of running around in circles. And he actually did it on a pretty bunged up ankle. I don't know if people were watching that. He definitely should have taken his seat at one point and just thought, nah, I'm fine. Rennie, you also just continue to have decent performances from people like Pollard, obviously Jefferson, so you got to be happy overall. You did have even some bench love if you chose to use it. Woody, you kind of had a rough go here because you were still doing fine. I mean, Brown was our running back 4. You had our wide receiver 3 in Wilson, and you knew that one was coming early. Kyler Murray really let you down. That would have been helpful, or just, not getting a freaking negative by Worthy. What also stinks with this coming down to the wire, if we really look at it downstairs here, had Dobbs been in, that is a 7-point swing. That would have done it. In terms of quarterbacks, only person in the world that can ever say this, had you started Dax, things might have been a little brighter out there, and you actually would have taken that one down. So unlucky. I don't think anyone can call BS on your calls. I think a lot of us would have made the same kind of decision, although the Worthy one was a little bit risky, so I don't know if you got stuck with your hand in the cookie jar on that one. Either way, if you can take a loss and still stay in the playoffs, I mean, you're better off than I am right now, so I can't knock you. And Rennie, man on fire. You're taking down the top dogs one after another. Let's see who's next on the register next week. For Battle of Kent supremacy here, in this particular case, average size Kent looked larger than life on this one. Unfortunately, Maxon, you couldn't pull it out. Oh, I don't even like the use of that language. I'm going to keep it in just because, oh man, I've just thrown myself for a loop. Anyway, Kent, as always, Lamar, who's actually the MVP, probably right now in the NFL. We'll see what happens. It seems to change week by week. He was the quarterback 3 on the week. And then you were just kind of riddled with okay performances. Sutton obviously was great. Chuba Hubbard's been a massive steal, but you had Olave, who, if you saw it, did not look good. And let's see how he fares coming back with that kind of a situation. Andrews as well has scored you touchdowns last couple of weeks, but not so much in this one. Buffalo decided to maybe let Miami have an offense again. So a few things just didn't crack your way with a 12-point kind of lead. Wouldn't have taken much to make things happen. I think Olave is probably the most that stuck it to you because Judy here could have helped out. Average Kent, or should I say second place Kent, you did just fine here. 148 is good enough to win most weeks. Not a shockingly massive week, but you got to be happy with Henry. He was the running back 5. And then just in general, going over or at your predicteds. Cincinnati's defense, anytime you can get 11 from a D, not too bad. Although with Vegas, maybe you were expecting or hoping for a little more. And you finally had your boy Odunze there, kind of put something together with a 100-yard game. That must just feel good as a football fan. And that maybe would have helped out because your other boy here didn't look so sharp. Either way, Maxon, as we're going to see in a second, you're really tied in that spot on the outside looking in. Kent, you continue this epic run all the way up to the second spot. Now, can you last and see if you can catch Gene? Let's see what the schedule says. We've got a little bit of gap in our top 2, and then, like I said, a couple teams over 500, then a bunch of us under 500, but 2 of at least the 4 and 5s making the playoffs. So, like I said, everyone's still got a shot. You just got to go on a run. There's a few people right now. You might want to avoid Gene. You might want to avoid Connor. Let's see how that fares. I already know how that fares. Come on, man. Could you have a stinker of a week. I need the win. Who drew Gene? We're looking all the way down here. So we got a 1 versus 2. Love when this happens. Actually, weirdly enough, this is happening in every single one of my leagues. So the fix is definitely in. Rennie's on fire going against trying to put Tim out of his misery here, but Tim's trying to hang on. Plus, we got a couple of teams trying to crack into the playoffs and a couple of teams trying to stay in the playoffs. So I am a repeating record on this one, but obviously every week matters now that we're in week 10. There you have it, Legacy. We wrap up week 9. Now, looking into week 10, we do have another funky schedule situation. We have given the Germans just a banger of a game on the early kind of hours, Carolina and the Giants. So, $20 if you can sit through that one. Although with the defenses, maybe just both offenses will go epic, and maybe you should start all of your Giants and your Panthers. What do I know? We're also back to bye weeks. If you have any Packers, Raiders, Browns, or Seahawks, you're going to want to make some contingency plans, because with points going the way they are and wins going the way they are, you definitely don't want to take a week off at this stage. So you can tell by my voice, I'm excited. We're even a couple days out, and I'm already ready to see, can I climb Mount Connor? That just sounds horrible. My phrasing today is just way off. I'm going to stop. Best of luck for week 10, everyone, before I say something stupid.